let us read from another section of Roar the Ganges. This book is written by Swami Tadatmananda, and it takes place through his eyes. Much of the book was a kind of preparation into becoming a Swami, and now a few chapters ago he was initiated into Hindu monkhood. We take a stroll down memory lane and experience this worldly renunciation through his fresh eyes. This chapter is called Worship of the Formless, and I gather that this chapter is about how it is even possible for us to worship the source of the universe when that source clearly has no form in particular. If you consider that ultimate nothingness from which this everythingness arose, it's very impersonal. But we are personal people. We are people. So how do we remedy this difference between our finite being and that infinite being? What is our personal relationship to them? Friday, March 24th. At exactly 5 a.m, I struggled to rise from sleep's dark depths to grope for my travel clock and silence's obstinate beeping. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, grabbed a plastic bucket from the bathroom, and thrust myself outside into the chilly morning air to fetch hot water for bathing. At this early hour, the stars still shone brightly in the black expanse above. Even earlier in the morning, ashram workers had stoked a wood fire under the water tank behind the dining hall. There, I filled my bucket with steaming water and hurried back into my room. I had risen earlier than usual to attend the morning puja, worship. I dressed quickly in my still unfamiliar saffron robes and went to the dining hall for a cup of tea. By 5:30 in the morning, I was sitting with other ashram residents in the covered terrace facing the temple. Its sacred chamber was illumined by oil lamps suspended on chains. Their warm orange glow revealed the deity within, a linga, a large black stone, rounded and oblong, set in a granite pedestal. The pujari, temple priest, stood alone in the small chamber finishing his preparations. A linga is a form in which Ishvara, God, is worshipped as Lord Shiva, the god of destruction and change. Its rounded, featureless shape symbolically represents God's formlessness. Linga literally means a sign, a mark that indicates something, often indicating gender. The relatively formless linga indicates the presence of the completely formless Ishvara. Standing behind the linga, on a taller pedestal, was a black granite icon of Lord Gangadhareshvara, a representation of Lord Shiva, bearing the force of the river Ganges as it descended from the heavens. According to a traditional legend, King Bhagirath spent many years in prayer and penance to bring the purifying waters of the Ganges down from the heavens. But when his prayers finally became fruitful, the Ganges descended with such force that the earth would have been shattered by its impact. So, King Bhagirath, not sure why that name is so hard for me. So King Bhagirath prayed once again, this time imploring Lord Shiva to protect the world. Lord Shiva broke the river's terrible force by receiving its flow onto his matted locks of hair. Lord Gangadhareshvara's form was intricately carved to display a variety of esoteric symbols. His head was crowned by a mass of matted hair into which the river is said to have flowed. His hands were positioned in symbolic, expressive gestures called mudras. His left palm was turned outward, bestowing blessings upon all devotees. His right hand was raised in assurance that there is nothing to fear. To the left, a small icon of Lord Ganesha, the remover of obstacles, carved from white marble, stood on a low platform. Each of the deities faced east in accordance with ancient texts that define almost every detail of temple construction. These deities had been the focus of twice daily worship since the temple was consecrated 20 years ago. Every ritual employs symbolism and is built around a central metaphor. For example, the Jewish Seder, not sure how that's pronounced, S-E-D-E-R, Seder, and Catholic Mass are essentially ritual meals. Worshippers gather together to break bread, not to satisfy their stomachs, but for the sake of spiritual nourishment. Hindu puja is based on a different metaphor, inviting a respected and beloved guest into one's home and honoring them. Such a visitor would be given a seat of honor, provided with a bath, fresh clothes, and so on. Puja follows this very theme. First, Ishvara is invoked in the deity's form and then worshipped by offering various gifts, services, and tributes. Just as a sumptuous meal would be given to a special guest, puja includes offering food. Good morning, Steve. Such worship seems to be an expression of mankind's archetypal need for ritual. People have always created ceremonies to celebrate both the mundane and the sacred. Some observances marked the changing seasons or implored God's grace for abundant crops or healthy progeny. Others were rites of passage marking important events in a person's life, like puberty or marriage. These rituals all combine elements of symbolism, aesthetic beauty, and communal participation. The first time I attended puja, the ceremony seemed strange, but as it became more familiar, and as I began to understand its symbolism, my participation became heartfelt and rewarding. It grew on me slowly, like love for classical music. Understanding and familiarity help foster love for classical music and for puja as well. Its attraction was strong enough to drag me out of bed at 5 o'clock, not my favorite time to rise. The entire liturgy of the puja was in Sanskrit, mostly hymns and mantras from the Vedas. Some parts were chanted in unison, and other parts in a call and response style led by the pujari. He performed ceremonial bathing of the deity, slowly pouring a stream of water over the linga from a brass pot, while we chanted Vedic hymns to Lord Shiva. He filled the pot again and again from a large bucket of water drawn earlier from the Ganges, and continued the ritual bathing until the hymns were complete. Then he drew a curtain across the doorway, veiling the inner chamber while he prepared for the next part of the puja. We chanted other hymns until the pujari opened the curtains to reveal the linga, now anointed with sandalwood paste and meticulously decorated with flowers, red and yellow roses, scarlet hibiscus, tiny white jasmine, and garlands of orange marigolds, all plucked from the ashram's gardens. I then understood that Mataji's loving dedication to tending the gardens was not simply to beautify the ashram grounds. The flowers she cultivated were offered in the temple twice each day, 7 days a week. Tending the gardens was an act of devotion for her. We then chanted a litany of 108 names of Lord Shiva. As we chanted each name, the pujari rained a handful of flower petals upon the linga. Om Namah Shivaya. Salutations unto Shiva. Om Maheshwaraya Namaha. Salutations to the Great Lord. Om Shambhave Namaha. Salutations unto the giver of peace. Some names were called mythological events in which Lord Shiva reigned glorious and triumphant. Other names referred to Ishvara as the creator, sustainer, or destroyer of the universe. Others related to Ishvara's immediate presence as the very fabric of existence. At the conclusion of the litany, worshippers began to make a tremendous rhythmic clamor. Gongs clanged, bells rang, drums beat staccato, and conch shells trumpeted wildly. This joyous noise announced the final offerings of incense, lights, and food. The sacred din stopped suddenly when the pujari set flame to a piece of camphor in a brass holder and waved it before the linga. The camphor flame symbolizes knowledge. As light destroys darkness, knowledge destroys ignorance. In many temples, the inner chamber is so dark that the deity within cannot clearly be seen until the priest lights the camphor and reveals its form. By analogy, just as the camphor flame reveals Ishvara's form in the temple, the flame of knowledge reveals Ishvara's presence pervading the world. Good evening, Jai. The camphor burned brightly while we chanted a hymn praising Ishvara as the consciousness that pervades the universe and illumines all that exists. This hymn ironically notes the futility of any attempt to reveal the Lord's limitless form with a mere lamp of burning camphor. God cannot be illumined by the sun, moon, or stars, nor even by lightning. What to speak of this flame? God alone shines, all else reflects its light, and by its light the universe is made manifest. The pujari then brought the still burning camphor into our midst. Each of us touched our fingers first to the flames and then to our eyes, symbolically inviting the flame of knowledge to enter our minds and illumine our hearts, so that we might know Ishvara's sacred presence in the world and in our own hearts. After the last of the hymns were chanted, the priest distributed bananas and raisins which had been offered earlier. after food is offered in puja, it belongs to Ishvara. And since that food remains at the end of the ritual, it is considered a gift from Ishvara, called Prasad. Whatever is distributed at the conclusion of puja, be it flowers, fruits, sweets, or even rice, it is received by the devout as prasada, as a blessing from Ishvara. Good night, Mariham. In some large temples, vast quantities of rice are offered and then distributed afterwards to needy people. The pujari also passed around a brass bowl filled with sacred ash called vibhuti, which we all duly applied to our foreheads. This ash is a religious symbol associated with Lord Shiva. Ashes represent his power of destruction. Instead of being frightening, Lord Shiva's capacity for destruction is considered beneficial because it is one's ignorance and delusion that are to be destroyed. To apply vibhuti to one's forehead is a symbolic prayer for the destruction of ignorance. Vibhuti is prepared by Vedic priests in a special ritual in which cow dung patties are burned until all that remains is pure ash. Swami Dayananda once told a hilarious story about arriving at New York's JFK airport, having traveled from Bombay. A customs officer inspecting his suitcase found a container of gray ash. Suspecting it to be illicit drugs, he opened the container and sniffed it cautiously. "What is this?" he asked with an intimidating tone. "Ashes," Swami Dayananda began to reply. The suspicious inspector immediately put his index finger into the ash. As he touched it to his tongue to analyze the powder, Swami Dayananda finished his incomplete reply. "Ashes, made from cow dung." The officer sputtered vigorously and turned pale. Okay, we'll pause our reading there for now. Thank you all for listening. Even though that Ishvara is by itself formless, through the use of metaphor, we can come to many forms through which worship is done. We'll continue reading this at a later time. And hello, Mahina. What page? Says Sky Guardian. We will be reading 302 next. We just finished 301. Hello, Billy. I'm glad you liked it, Vistiel. And thank you to those who sent a gift whilst I read. I would like to extend my gratitude back to you now that I have a moment.